Hello and welcome to the second in this special series of discussions with the Archbishop, the Most Reverend His Grace Charles Jason Gordon. We're talking in this series about the church in society, and this episode deals with the church in Carnival. Good to have you once again, sir.
Good to be with you, Andy.
All right, so let me tell you how I come to this, because for years I used to go to the opening of the spectacular Calypso tent, and see Father Clyde Harvey at the time blessing in the proceedings, opening the tent.
And I
always used to have these questions about, because I grew up in a situation in an era in which that ought not to have been allowed. There was this separation between what people call things of the spirit and things of the flesh, and the Carnival and Calypso was seen as part of that. So when I started seeing a priest blessing a Calypso tent, you're going to hear all kinds of Calypsos. I still wonder about whether or not, did he have permission? What was the position of the church with that? Let's start talking about that and how that became integrated into, and then we go back and talk about where Carnival came from as we understand it.
So Carnival really is a Catholic festival. And that's kind of the beginning and the ground of it, because you'll only find a pre-Lenten Carnival where there is Catholicism. In parts of Europe, you still have vestiges of it. Wherever there's Protestant or Reformation Christianity, you will not find a carnival. So like Barbados, they don't. So they move the thing to the crop over, which is really about the end of the sugarcane crop and the harvest. So it's still a carnivalesque and a festival around the harvest. But the carnival as we know it, on the 2 days before Ash Wednesday, and in its form and pomp, is something that is related to Catholicism. Brazil, likewise.
Yeah.
So a priest blessing Carnival would have seemed at a certain time to be a complete breakdown in order. But at an earlier time, it would have been seen as a normal part of the order, because the Carnival or the Carnivalesque, and we have several, so even like the Feast of Fools, which we still retain, the day when the children walk with their toys to the church in, right after Christmas.
Innocents Day.
Holy Innocents, the blessing of, that was the Feast of Fools. And the point of the Carnivalesque is turning the whole world upside down. Which is a chant out of Sri Canal, Mud Madness.
Yes.
And this reversal of right order. So the pauper becomes the king becomes a pauper. Those who are low and disadvantaged in society, they become the elite, and those who are the elite, they play the other side of the society. And this turning of the world upside down, this destabilizing, and being able to see the world from another perspective, is what the Carnivalesque really is about.
Yeah, because just what you were saying there earlier on, I remember I was saying that when I went to live in Canada in the 1970s, and saw, Montreal is the main city in Quebec, which is French Canada, which therefore, French Catholics, and I was looking at Carnival in February. And saying, well, I didn't know that existed, and then you got to understand why.
Yes. So if you go back to the beginnings, around that time, February, height of winter.
Winter. Yeah. Some places they call it the Winter Carnival.
Yes, and it's everything is bleak, gray. Life has gone very, very dull. You're entering into 40 days of austerity, the most austere time in the Catholic cycle of liturgy. And in preparation for that, this kind of emerged as a human thing. Well, if we're going to have this austerity in a weather that is so austere, we should do something to prepare for it. And that preparation became all kinds of things. So the eating of the meat would be a big part, because, well, you might as well get rid of the meat, because you can't eat it for the next 40 days, it'll go rancid. Yeah. So whatever meats you had, you had the festival of that, of the alcohol, of the dance, of the costuming eventually, and little by little the thing emerged into a pageantry.
Yeah, and people say that is the literal meaning of carnival, carnivale.
Carnivale. Farewell to the flesh.
Yeah.
And so it's farewell to the flesh by eating meat, particularly by focusing on the body, drink, food, etc., etc. But it is this time of heightened joy and festivity, and drop dead midnight on Tuesday, a new moment emerges, and Ash Wednesday starts in the most austere way. And whatever happened in those 2 days before is contrasted now by what is happening on Ash Wednesday. Remember, O man, that you are dust, and unto dust you shall return. This is remembering that you are human, that you have senses, that you have feelings and happiness and joy and all. And this is remembering your eternal dimension, that you were created to be with God forever.
Yeah.
And don't forget that.
Yeah. How do you explain to other people who would look at that, people going to people playing Mass on Carnival Monday and Tuesday, all the so-called excesses that some of us engage in, and then going Ash Wednesday, for that ritual to get ashes, and people see that as hypocrisy. How do you explain to people who don't quite understand?
Well, ritual has its own logic. That's very different. Victor Turner is a great thinker behind ritual, and the point of ritual is containment, and so the excessiveness of the fleshiness of the carnival is contained in a ritual that does not defy, or is not supposed to defy, the moral norms, but is supposed to push them right to the edge of existence. And then at that edge, then this thing ends, and this next thing begins. And there's a catharsis in moving from the excess of worldly pleasure to the deep austerity of Lenten penance. And that movement creates in the soul a movement towards God, and a recognition that all of that joy and happiness that we had for those couple of days is a very earthy thing. But this really takes us to another place and another level that cannot touch. And it is the contrast of the two that creates the catharsis and helps the penitent of Ash Wednesday to spend the 40 days considering the eternal destiny of the human condition, until we come ultimately to the resurrection, and we come back up now to this incredible joy on the Saturday night and Sunday of Easter, where that joy now is contrasted with this fleeting pleasure, and in the whole rhythm, what we have is this incredible movement of the soul to be able to come to conversion of heart and see God in the resurrection as the centerpiece of our whole reality.
Yeah, I want to come to, we have some video clips of people talking about the carnival, at least the Trinidad and Tobago Carnival, in context that will explain some of this. And what I wanted for us to look at is Rosalind Gabriel, who's talking about her portrayals of Mass. Yes. While we wait for it to come up, there are a couple of things in the history that I want to address as well. There was a time, again, when I was growing up, that the question of pan in church was just not on.
Oh, boy.
And singing calypsos in Lent were not on. How do we sort of evolve to that point?
Well, that's a great question, but I think they're ready for us on the clip.
Yes, let's see. This is Rosalind Gabriel.
Before I start a production, I pray for inspiration, that I choose the right theme, that the theme could be educational for the children, it could be nation building for Trinidad and Tobago, so that we could remind everybody the beauty of the islands that we live in. When I produce a costume based on Trinidad and Tobago, any part of the environment or the culture I am praising God because when people see the beauty in the production, it brings joy to their heart and they praise the Lord. When I was a child, I would hear the music from where we lived and run to the corner to see the bands passing, and what really passed was spectacles. Today, I don't think we could call anything in Carnival here much of a spectacle. What we have now from most of the band leaders are moving parties on the road with naked people. That's not something you'd run out your house to willingly see. Mass has lost its identity because years ago you could tell a Wayne Barkley costume passing, you could tell a Peter Minchell costume passing, a Stephen Leung, a Lil Hart. You could tell where the bands came from without saying, what band are you from? I think what we have now in the majority is that everybody could go in the same band. For many years, I have been promoting a family band where the parents and the children could play together on Monday and Tuesday. We keep a clean atmosphere around the band. We play only clean music. Any children's band have certain rules and regulations. There's no drinking allowed around the children. The parents, if they care to take a drink, they are asked to move away from the band. We also ask the parents to dress a certain way. If you're coming out with the child to an event, you know, don't wear a real short pants or a naked type top. We ask parents to dress carefully. All these rules are put down in a circular that they get when they collect their costumes. We try to teach by example rather than, not practicing what you teach. It has worked for many years. Also, I mandate no vulgar dancing. You could have a good time without that type of dancing. I have put people out the band already for that. I think as a people, when we know rules are going to be enforced, we follow the rules.
All right, she's right about one thing.
What is that?
That in many cases now, you don't know. You're looking at a band coming across the avenue or wherever, going across the stage. You don't know which band it is. You could fall into any band.
If you get lost somewhere in town, and you're in one band, you could join any one of the bands because they all look the same.
Yeah, same costume.
The same costume, the same effects, the same nakedness, the same. And that's what we have lost. And she's naming something about a loss and her intention on holding to what we have had before and not losing it. And also holding to the sense of family, which is a big theme this year with Skinny and Marshall and Bungie. That we hold to that sense of family, which is what the Carnival was in an earlier era. I mean, I remember my parents taking us and we would walk downtown and see this spectacle that was amazing. The costume, the players, the artistry. And that was the era of the big band. Barkley and Amon and Edmund Hart and these big Leung, these big bands where there were portrayals of things. And Paradise Lost, and portrayal of themes that when you saw the band, you saw the theme, and each section contributed to the overall feeling of it.
George Bailey and
Bailey, yes, and it is that was a formative thing for me growing up. I came into the tail end of that era, but what we now have is something of a totally different era. So my understanding of Carnival is that Carnival is really the shadow, or the unconscious shadow, of the collective psyche of Trinidad and Tobago. What the dream is to the individual, the Carnival is to us as Trinidad and Tobago. And you can't read the dream in a literal sense. You always have to read it more metaphorically. And you have to probe it for depth. Because what emerges as the images really are images to be used metaphorically to speak of other things. So when I look at the carnival that way, what I see is something different. And what she's speaking about, and I think she's right in what we have lost, is a move from if you would like to say, the 50s to 70s of the epic mass, to something now of what I would say the commercialization of the mass. And so in those days, people would gather around the mass camp, and they would make the mass themselves there. It became a family. It became a community. It became a space. Today, that is just imported. And because it's all now imported, it's changed the whole tone of it.
Costumes coming from China.
Yes. This is just 5,000 costumes. Let's just bring them all in. Do them like this. And this one, and this one. If they look the same, that's okay. So you could hold your costume from last year to next year, and you could find a section somewhere to play.
Yeah, but it shouldn't get to define the carnival in the sense that it is, because that's what people see when they comment on the carnival. But you have
it's so much bigger than that. It's so much bigger than that. So if I take the movement of the carnival, carnival in its pre-emancipation days was the French planters in their little spaces, in their houses. And they were playing these big characters, the Dame Lorraine and the Jambalassi, and they were playing these characters, Baby Doll. And each one of them is turning the society upside down, Negro Jardin. When a plant is playing a garden Negro, what you have is a total reversal. And you have the slaves looking in on this festival. Then emancipation comes. The slaves are now free. And they say, well, if them could play, who is we?
And then we turn the tables.
So then the slaves now takes over the carnival, and the French planter retreats. And carnival goes to the street, and you have a whole set of other things coming forth in the carnival. And for a long time, there was this great tension between the slaves and the French. And then we are a British colony. So the British now bring their puritanical view on this festivity that they see as pure rubbish. And this is as ungodly as one can get. And this is the tension of the carnival. But much later on in the 1890s, you have now a coming back together where the upper classes, they move to the lorries. So in the early parts of the 1900s, they're up on the lorries, but they're with everybody else in the mass of the society. And then eventually they do away with the lorries. And they come down, and we have a hybridization of a social experiment in Trinidad that the carnival traces every stage of this social movement. So when they come off of the lorries, and that's when you got the big epic era, and you got now the mixing and mingling of every social class, every race, every creed in the carnival street. Then you had a Trinidad and Tobago that was at its best, but under most pressure at the same time. And so the pressure and the social integration, the hybridity, creates for Trinidad something of an opportunity. And so you see in the carnival not only the unconscious negative, but you also see the goal and what's best about us and who we are. And that is really a big piece of the carnival that we have to understand. Even in this, there's such positive elements in the whole carnival that we can't make the whining and the bikini and beads the only thing that carnival is about.
Whining and the jamming. How do you explain to people of different Christian persuasions who want to get as far as possible from carnival as they do? People go to camps, people just escape.
Yes. That's a serious one, It's one that is hard to explain. But let me read this quote for you, and it might explain something of it. Yeah. So this is a guy writing to his friend. He says, I wish, Billy, you had been here in the time of the carnival. You have no idea of the gaiety of the place in this season, of its metamorphosis, whose were nothing compared to the changes that took place in the person of the Catholics in Trinidad. High and low, rich and poor, learned and unlearned, all found masking suits for Carnival. A party of ladies, having covered themselves with a party of brigands, assailed me in my quarters and nearly frightened me out of my wits. I was just going to cut and run when Ensign, who was with me, not knowing the joke and thinking there were so many devils come to take him before his time, drew his sword. Now this is written in 1830s. Now that could be written now. And because the sense of the lewdness of the carnival has been a sub-theme in what I would say the British history of Trinidad and Tobago. So another one, and this was from the newspaper. We will not dwell on the disgusting and indecent scenes that were enacted on our streets. We will not say how many we saw in a state of nearly approaching nudity, as to outrage decency and shock modesty. We will not particularly describe the woman on a pole which was followed by hundreds of Negroes yelling out a savage Ghanaian song. We regret to say that 9/10 of these people were Creoles. We will not describe the ferocious fight between the dams and the warlords, which resulted from the murmuring. But we will say at once that the custom of keeping carnival by allowing the lower order of society to run about the streets in a wretched masquerade belongs to other days and ought to be abolished in our own.
That's in the Trinidad Gazette.
That's the Gazette.
In 1838.
1838.
So these are discussions that have been going on, conversations that have been going on.
The conversation in 1838 is the same conversation we have today. So this would be from the Protestant Christian groups that would see this thing as a complete affront to moral decency. Yeah. So this is a puritanical religion that is looking on at the festivity. While this festivity is developing very quicker, because 1830, this is the end of slavery. Yep. So this is the first time that the slaves are out, 34 to 38, when they're out on the streets. And therefore, the movement from a European festivity to African festivity, and ultimately to hybridity, where these elements come into some hybridity eventually. So the conversation around carnival and morality is a very old conversation.
Yes. And you say some of these things, you did this as part of the work for your PhD. How is that, somebody who is in ascendancy, being a priest, wanting to be a priest, now you're the Archbishop of Trinidad and Tobago, part of your intellectual work was about carnival?
You know, that's a great question, you know. Because if I take my theory right, in spiritual direction, when I'm helping a person, and I get stuck and I don't know where they really are and where they need to go, I will ask them, I say, please have a dream. Because if they come to me with a dream, we have material to tease out. And in teasing out that material, we'll find and hear where God is in that person's life, and what the next developmental step is for them. And because I came to the belief, because I was reading young psychology quite a bit and looking at folklore and how the young analysts use folklore to understand society and to talk about masculinity and to talk about archetypes and all these things. Because that was part of my reading, I said, well, this could be applied to carnival. And if I want to help society make its next steps, I have to probe where the unconscious of the society is most readily seen. Yeah. And that, to me, is the carnival. And if you understand the carnival this way, is it right? Is it moral? No, there's a lot happening in carnival that I will say is absolutely immoral. And that transformation is part of the social fabric of our society. But if you start by criticizing that, and in other words, a literal reading, you miss the point of why we have come to that. And therefore, what the remedy is in moving us from that to the next stage of our social development.
Yeah, and in that context, and let's take a look at what we have about a Catholic band in Carnival. I think we're trying to speak to that very issue about what is important, what needs to be treasured about the
Carnival.
About the carnival.
And
Yeah, because
Small in numbers, but big in heart, the Word and Associates, also known as the Catholic Band, hit the road for the 5th year running with Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Bible. Throughout the years, they have faithfully offered their few loaves and fish for the redemption of Trinidad Carnival.
Christians do have a place in Mass, do have a place in Carnival. And so it's making a bold statement for the last 5 years.
Immersed in the midst of beads, bikinis, and feathers, they dance and chip through the streets. They play the Mass, celebrating the culture with great joy, while at the same time glorifying the Creator, giver of all the gifts, the talents showcased during this festival. Deuteronomy 1. Catholic, all-inclusive. A small seed given generously and unashamedly in God's time will produce abundant fruit.
Deuteronomy per se. Thank you very much for making this as a success in 2015. And thank everybody who came out.
So let's start from the perspective that my grandmother would say. This is a case of if you can't win them, join them.
correct. I had become so tired of condemnation, so tired of pointing out where I felt Carnival was going wrong. Carnival Sunday after Carnival Sunday sermons for a couple of years, that eventually, this idea of the Catholic band emerged. And
You were part of the decision making for it?
no, it emerged from lay people.
Yeah.
But the two priests who gave support to it immediately was now Emeritus Archbishop Joe Harris and myself.
Okay.
And instinctively we felt this is something that ought to happen. Because if we're condemning, then let's light a light. And if there are a group of lay people who want to light a light in the midst of the darkness, don't stop cursing the darkness. Let's light a light and let's demonstrate it's possible to have great fun. And let's demonstrate that having great fun in the midst of the carnival with all the other excesses that are happening is still something that we want to hold out as an ideal. And the first year it won prizes. All the years I think it won prizes as a small band, and it really made a lot of noise, which was a great thing. So here's the church.
Did you jump with them, or did you consider playing?
No, I didn't.
Why not?
Because if the priest could play, who is
Well,
we?
we went through that.
We had that calypso before.
Yes, because Father John Sewell, but he was Anglican.
He was an Anglican priest. But I thought we even within the carnival, one must hold boundaries within a certain. But I certainly gave all support to the group. You see, if you think of the carnival, and that would be in the 2000s, when this whole thing of carnival had really, to my mind, reached to a kind of an end point. I put that transition in Carnival somewhere in the early 90s. I put the marking point with Dollar Wine. And I say, that song for me shifted the focus, or at least it signaled the shift of focus in the psyche of the Caribbean, of Trinidad and Tobago. Because when the song came out, and it became a big hit.
Yeah, it was a big hit.
In that year. Even inside the song, the Calypsonian is saying, but this is not a wine, this is a jam. and he's noting that this thing is a shift. This year I turned on the radio and heard a group talking about the whining. I think it was Carnival, but I couldn't pick up for the limited time I had who the group really was. And they were saying, something happened because we gave up whining and we started to jab. And once you move from what was our culture to this jab, something else came into the Carnival, and that is what has destroyed the culture. But the dollar wine has another signification, because everybody starts to go for big money wine. Now, in the 1980s, the late 80s, the country moved from social democracy, which was the economic philosophy of Williams and of most of the Caribbean, to liberal capitalism and privatization of everything. And that signals a major shift in the psyche, and it also in terms of what the good of society looks like. So the good of society was always about the community, the family, yes, about the social fabric, about all these things. And now, once you move to liberal capitalism, the good in the society is now really about making money, about big money, and about big money wine. And the whole industry moves from artistry to what I will call commercialization. And that shift from the artistry of the past to the commercialization of the present moves Carnival to be about big money wine.
So that presumably it's one aspect of the Carnival that you probably have some misgivings about, if not outright objection to.
Yes. I remember around that time, I brought in 3 of the big band leaders, or the most prominent band leaders, Lewis, Hart, and McFarlane, to have a conversation.
Lewis was the man from Island People.
Yes. To have a conversation in Archbishop's house, which was my office at the time as Vicar for Administration. They came in trepidation. And I said to them, this is a simple conversation. I want to know what's the role of artists in society, because I'm confused. We had a wonderful conversation. So Brian McFarlane kept pushing it. He said, we're not there just to pander to people's wants. We are there, and our role is about transformation. And this goes back to Plato and Aristotle, by the way. And there's a conversation back then about what's the role of the artist in the society. So some feel it's about holding up a mirror to people and portraying what people want, the mirror image. And some feel it's about a catharsis, which invites people into sacred space and moves them through the process of regeneration and points them not to what they want, desire, but to what they need, growth and development. And so what we then had in that aspect of the Carnival is the 2 biggest bands, or 2 of the bigger bands, going straight for pleasing people because they needed to make money. And McFarlane said, no, this is about ritual, this is about regeneration, this is about soul, this is about all sorts of other things. And in that conversation, all the things I had felt had really become very clear to me. The selling out of the country. Because the problem is not the Carnival. Eh? The problem is what the country is doing that is now being betrayed in the Carnival. And so the selling out of the country and the soul of the country to money. And this madness that we had with money accumulation, which we now had until recently as an upward boom for many, many years, became the ethos of the Carnival. And the soul of the Carnival was now in peril. And that is where I saw the carnival at that stage.
Yeah, because at that same time, I think I was listening to a discussion on the radio one morning, driving into Port of Spain with people like Richard Afong, who again was a band leader, and he was making the point that, well, it is about producing what the people want, and people don't want to play the famous Saldana and George Bailey mask anymore with with
costume,
shield and breastplate and spear, and nobody wants that, so you have to go where the people are.
So, and that is if your interest is commercial.
Yeah.
But I think there's a deeper piece to this. As we move more and more to the capital dominating the psyche of our nation, to late American capitalism, which is the most crude form of capitalism we've had, with really where people have become commodities. And it's no longer about human beings. It's now about making of the money. So once we went further and further that way, the throwing off of the clothes becomes really what happens because we're covering up our shame for 365 days. We nearly need to expose ourselves in these 2 days of reversal that we have. I remember hearing around that time Peter Minshall do an interview. And, well, that is drama.
You mean when he brought out the band Hallelujah?
No, it was, before that, I think by then Minshall had stopped.
Yeah.
So before that, Minshall had been constantly challenging and made it into pageantry, made it into the story, made it into mythology. And Minshall actually was the one who helped me to see the carnival in this deeper form, because his work was so pointed to the unconscious of the Trinidad psyche. But this was an interview he was doing. He didn't bring out a band that year. And he said, before people used to put on the mask, and they used to step inside of a costume and play that costume. You got 2 days of looking at the world from a whole different vantage point. And if you were a sailor, you had your steps you had to do. If you were one of the devils, you had to start as an imps and work your way up. You can't just start, there's a ritual to this. If you were a Dame Lorraine or Baby Doll, you put on the mask and you play this character. He said, and now, what are they doing? What are they doing? Well, that year, the banners all over Port of Spain was play yourself. And that, for me, was a milestone in my own mind and imagination. The difference between playing the mask and playing yourself. And what we have now is a mask as playing yourself, which is a very vulgar display of what is pent up and unconscious in the Trinidadian psyche, now being expatiated on the stage, on the street, as a way of compensating for the dehumanizing and the lack of control and the lack of civility that we're experiencing in society. Yeah. And so the mask is betraying something that is very sick in the soul of the Trinidadian psyche.
Yeah. But going back to the Catholic band and talk about Deuteronomy, what was the depiction there and what was significant about?
So they did Genesis.
Yeah.
So they did the first 5 books of the Bible. Right. They did Exodus. They did so each of these books were trying to capture something of our biblical history and relate it to something of the contemporary experience. So that in the Deuteronomy, which is the law, and the laying forth of the law, and the fact that you at the end of the day you have to live within the law, that the law is so important to capture imagination and all these decrees that were handed down from the ancestors and ultimately from God to Moses, which are important if we're going to be the kind of community and society that we are destined to become.
Yeah. So, Kenan, is it okay for another priest to play in the band? Or in any other band?
That's always been a big question. Huh? And what I will say is that there have been priests who have played.
Catholic priests
who have played. Besides, if the priest could play, who is we? There have been Catholic priests who have played.
With the blessings of the
No. They have played.
Okay.
This is not an area where I would want to start to talk about regulations and blessings. But I would say that you have to know both yourself and the mass that you're playing. If you're into a band where the behavior all around is such that it is really crossing all moral boundaries, then there's something that is happening that we need to deal with. So that's one of those areas where I don't think any archbishop has ever legislated on that one way or the other.
But jumping in a steel band is quite a different thing.
Yes, because that again is just having fun on the streets, and that's a sense of community. So I started a Lenten crusade in a panyard, and the first year that happened, people say, you can't do that. I said, but why not? Because that's a community space, and it's a community space where people are happy to go. And lots of people that year said to me, I haven't been to church for many, many years, but when I saw you doing this, I said, I have to come. Yeah. And so it caught imagination of many, many people. I remember when I was a young priest, Father Michel de Bataille, was the editor of the Catholic News, came to me and said, could you give us some reflections for Lent this year? Because I'd done some the year before. And this was like a week before Carnival. And I said to him, the only thing that I have that I'm working on is David Rudder. He said, well, I'm not sure, I said, let me do one and you'll see what you think. If you think it's useful, publish. And I sent him the first one, I think it was 1990, which was a whole profound thinking about what has gone wrong. The more things change, the more they remain the same. And it was Rudder at his philosophical best. And he published, so I said, gosh, I have to do 6 more. I do 5 more. So I did Jose, which is this thing on the coup. And the dark side, facing the dark side of our reality. Little Man, enough is enough, say little man. We have to bring back the ancient tenor pan. And then Stiff-Waist Man, which was going into the bush to find masculinity, to come back and be a man in society, which is really the ritual of the carnival. And then Ministry of Rhythm, which is rather really reflecting on what has gone wrong. What do you do in a world that has lost its way? When the children are dancing with the devil and with the darkness, what do you do? And it is him asking about the darkness that he's seeing in society. Yeah. So I did these 6 reflections of Calypso and Carnival. So I suppose I've been pushing the envelope in terms of the art form and its benefit or its usefulness for a spiritual regeneration and reflection.
Yeah. Let's go back to something that Rosalind Gabriel said in producing these bands, what is allowed and what is not allowed in children's mass. But my sense is that in the same way that a lot of young people are playing the pan, but they don't go to a steel band occasion. They play the pan for Panorama and that's it. Yes. A lot of young people come up playing that kind of mass. A lot of people play, have their parents, their children in Rosalind Gabriel's band. Yeah. But then as they become teenagers and young adults, they go to the other kind of mass.
Yes.
So something is not
I agree.
hooking them in.
So I think, the lack of boundaries in Carnival is really about the lack of boundaries in Trinidad and Tobago. The lack of container. I think the Mass is saying to us that we have become a society that wants freedom without wanting responsibility. Yeah. And that is true not only in Carnival, it's true with crime, it's true with business, it's true with corruption, it's true with every segment of the society. But the Carnival is where it's easiest to see it. And I think we've come to a place in Trinidad and Tobago where somebody has to be brave enough to start to talk about boundaries. And what does it mean to live within these boundaries? Now that person would be crucified. As you see the kind of reaction that the police commissioner is getting, because he's starting to impose boundaries in one area, the whole area of crime. And there's big pushback from all kind of quarters. But I think, I've heard a religious commenter once in America saying, we have the Statue of Liberty, but we don't have a Statue of Responsibility, and that's the problem with America. And I think the same is true with us. We are a rambunctious democracy that wants complete freedom. But sometimes when freedom is pushed too far, what you have is a licentiousness that really deadens the soul and that creates a malady that has become Trinidad and Tobago. We have had corrupt regime after corrupt regime in this country. And each time we throw our hands up and say, oh, it can't get worse. Well, and then you find out it actually did. Why? Why is that? Because we have taken this thing of freedom, which is so dear to us because of emancipation. And it is absolutely there. But we're not understanding paradox. That freedom requires responsibility if freedom is going to remain free.
I just want to be permitted to ask you one question on what you said about the Commissioner of Police, because, you know, I'm one of those who you might describe it as pushing back, and I was saying that he should understand, he should accept boundaries as well for himself. Do you think that he should have carte blanche because he means well and he's doing a lot that is required?
If the only way to enforce boundaries is to have boundaries enforced everywhere. You can't have no boundaries enforcing boundaries.
Okay.
But you have to understand, he's swimming in the same sea that is polluting all of us. And so he's thinking with the same frame of thought that is infecting the reason for the crime, the reason for the corruption, the reason for the jamming in the carnival, the reason because we as a people, our psyche requires boundaries, and it's the most elemental piece of parenting which is failing drastically for the same reason. If a parent isn't willing to give a sacred no to a child, that child will never have boundaries, and that leads to addiction. That leads to all the ailments that
permissiveness and excessiveness. And
yes,
yeah.
and we have become that and the carnival is showing us that on one part, but it's showing us other things on other parts.
So given what you're saying, you know, how would you respond to an invitation, not necessarily up to yourself, but to priests to judge carnival competitions, whether it's at the Savannah or anywhere?
You know, there was a time when the priests used to decide what movies came into the country, the censorship board.
Yes.
I don't know that. I don't think that that's the job of a priest, but it is the job of an informed lay person who's culturally connected, and I think we have a lot of those.
Yeah.
And I think
starting with Lennox Toussaint and plenty.
Yes, we have a lot. We have a lot of those, and I think there should be a tax on bands for bad behavior.
Yes.
There should be discounted points. They should lose points for bad behavior. And I think we must, and this is the problem with post-independence Trinidad and Tobago. And this is the other sub-layer of where we are. So the church enforced the boundaries. Well, the French planters enforced the boundaries up to a certain point. The church enforced the boundaries after that point to now. And now, who is enforcing the boundaries? Is we ourselves trying to figure this thing out. And nobody's willing to enforce the boundaries. So what the carnival is actually saying is that we haven't yet decided the kind of society we want to become. And that's a much bigger question. And because we haven't decided, what is happening is we've become a society of freedom, which means I'm free to thief, I'm free to kill, I'm free to have sex on the side of a stage, I'm free to do what I want to do. And is that the society we want to become? And I'm saying Carnival is showing us that. But the real ailment in our psyche is that we haven't made a choice for the kind of civilization we want to become. And therefore, we are becoming one of a kind of an irresponsible freedom that is going to be the sole destruction of our nation.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean, though, that the church, because that's the history we have, should remove itself entirely from it, as other churches do.
I can't remove myself entirely from it. And I can't remove the church entirely from it. Because if you have an ailment, the church is to be a field hospital. That's an image that Pope Francis has given us. And that, how are you going to be field hospital if you're totally divorced from the patient? And that's why I would engage in this kind of conversation about Carnival. That's why I would make comments. That's why I would write. And I would push as I can. But I think we have come to a place where we have to find a way towards boundaries.
Yeah.
Not only for Carnival.
Yes, in general, in a lot of respects.
In every area of our life.
What about nuns in the Carnival?
I'm sure there have been nuns who have gone down on a Juve morning or chip with a steel band. I've never heard of a nun who was put on costume and played, but I would hope it's not bikini and beats if it ever happened.
But in their ways, you'd know that they would enjoy some aspects of it.
Now, remember, the churches have Carnival. So St. Anne's has a wonderful Carnival party. They've been having it for years. The theme 2019 is oneness. And it's really about family. They say that they are the one Carnival event that bring your whole family. Because it's going to be a family event. St. Teresa's has a Carnival Friday line, bring your cooler with music, and many of the parishes have a Carnival event. Yeah. Then there's the schools. Santa Rosa.
Sunday Carnival, Sunday, they come bring your cooler and hang out.
Correct. Then it is schools. A lot of our schools have Carnival, calypso competitions, dance, parties, etc., etc. So that the Carnival is not the problem. The problem is the license and the irresponsibility that we have allowed to creep into Trinidad and Tobago society.
Licentiousness that goes with it. So that there could be a carnival fete in a Catholic school compound, but there must be...
Choose your music well. And have a code.
And have excessive consumption of alcohol and bad behavior.
You know, Maximus Dan had a wonderful tune many years ago, Order, don't cross the border. Yeah. That's what I would say. And that Maximus was kind of getting to this sense of boundaries that were required. That there's an order. Don't cross the border. Don't go where you're not supposed to go. And I think that I could see great festivities in Catholic enclaves with great fun and revelry, and still within boundaries.
If you're challenged to point to some part of the Bible, some book in the Bible that okays activities about Carnival.
When David was moving the ark from place to place to enshrine the ark up in Jerusalem, he stripped right down to his loincloth and started to dance before the ark. His wife, Bathsheba, really frowned on him and dressed him down. You're a king. How could you act like a commoner like this? And the scripture says, and from then he never had relation with her. But David danced before the ark in a kind of a freedom that in a loincloth, well, that is as close to a male bikini as one could get in that day, stripped right down. And that was his offering back to God.
Yeah. And I suppose there are, from bits that I've read, there have been a lot of references to that kind of thing in the Bible with people.
Festivities is a very Jewish thing. They had several festivities every year. And the festivities would have had excess. In the first miracle of Jesus was changing water into wine. 120 gallons of wine when they had already drunk the wine that was set out for the 1 week of the festivity. That's a lot of excess wine when all the wine had already been consumed that should have lasted for the entire week.
So there's no prohibition against any kind of
the alcohol and those things. No. But I want to point to this year, because I see some wonderful things happening this year in the Calypso. Who feel it know it? But yes, we're in a time of recession, and we could look at Carnival and never know that. The amount of money people are paying to take part in it. And I have no doubt a lot of people mortgaging their next years, whatever, to be able, and it is irresponsible.
Some cases, there are organizations who encourage people to take loans to go to fets and to buy costumes.
To have this Carnival extravaganza, and after that again is a breach of the limits. There is a sense of need and poverty in the nation, and we have to highlight that. And I think that is important. All the big tunes this year have nothing to do with the lewd, the crude, the jamming and the whining, They all have to do it with who we are, and as a nation, who feels it, knows it, or Savannah grass. This we culture. This is we think this is we have to preserve this. We have to enjoy this. Family, this is who we are. We have to celebrate this thing of being a family. For me, the one that steals my head this year is Aaron Duncan's Back to Basics. That just teeth my head completely. The first time I heard it, I couldn't believe it. Because here is a teenager, a young teenager, who has gone back to the Limbo, gone back to Sparrow, gone back to Kitchener, to Brother Resistance. But he's gone back there as a retrieval to go forward. Because if you listen to his music, his rhythm, his styling, even his music video, it's not cast as a retro. It's cast as future. And so while he's retrieving, he's moved from 1.0. I would put Marshall as 2.0. and I would put Aaron as a 3.0. But this is hermeneutics, the art of interpretation. Because he's retrieving to give the sense and the meaning to a contemporary. And he says, I speak for my generation. And he is. In his style, in his music, in the way he's portraying it. But he's also doing a kind of a retrieval. He says, before Facebook could post it, Aaron Duncan already saying it. I already saying it. So I'm even ahead of my technology. I'm ahead of the major trends in the country. And this happened right here in Trinbago. That he's celebrating us, like Savannah Grass.
Right. Let's go back to Tigress's song, and Who Feels It Knows It, because she says she's talking about depression and wanting to shine a light there from a personal experience. She's lost 2 sons.
Lost in the society as a mother. And there's so many people in society that have lost. We've lost so much. We've lost so much just in terms of humanity. We've lost so much in terms of our soul. But when you think of the murder count, and the road deaths, and there's so many ways in which people are grieving, that her song about grief and loss, I think is a very appropriate song, because I think there's a grieving that we should be doing, and because we're not doing the grieving, we're plastering it over with a whole lot of stuff that is not helping us to do the soul work that is required in a country where mortality has been so grave, where in a country where we have had such excesses, in a country where in spite of what we call a recession, people are still borrowing money foolishly and living extravagantly. And there is a grieving to be done in Trinidad and Tobago.
And it's not to be excused on the issue where people have to find escape valves for their pent-up frustrations and anxieties. And
we could go and push a steel band and play, have a good time, It doesn't mean spending thousands of dollars. In my days, we would have a house fete, and everybody bring a little something, and music, and 40, 50 young people having a wonderful time. This notion of having to spend big money, it comes back to this shift from the 80s to the 90s, to the commercialization of the thing, and to the selling to the Trinidadian mind that money is the most important thing. And if you're not spending big money, it can't be good. And I think we have to shift from that.
Yeah, and again, it not that we should do away with it entirely.
No, but let's find a way to have some boundaries. Let's find a way to celebrate what's best about us, which is what Aaron, which is Kes is doing that. Let's find a way to celebrate the family, and let's have occasions where the whole family could be included, which means that let's put some real boundaries back in place in our society.
Yeah. So there's no problem with telling you, have a good carnival, wishing you have a happy carnival.
I will do my best to do so. I had carnival last night at St. Anne's party in Queen's Hall, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful. There are many aspects to the carnival, and there are many that are so noteworthy that we should celebrate them.
Archbishop Charles James Gordon, thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
Great show.
Lord is Lord.
was great.